Okay, so the last thing I want to do is raise some objection to Dolbach's argument. Now, in class, I gave you a summary of Dolbach's argument for hard determinism. I'm not going to go over that summary again, but in short, Dolbach believes that human beings are like any other object in the world in that our actions can be explained by scientific laws. If we assume that human actions cannot be explained by scientific laws, then suddenly human actions become mysterious, and we can't really explain what we do. Dolbach says that view is not right. All human actions can be explained by physical laws, but the physical laws of nature, are laws of causal determination. Whatever it says objects do, it must do necessarily. Well, if those laws operate on us, we must act necessarily. And all our actions are predetermined by these laws of nature. So that's the gist of his argument. Now, I want to make a few objections. So these objections are presented on the back of handout 1.5 under the title Dolbach's argument. So you can follow along with that handout. Now, Dolbach's argument appears to make what I'm going to call the strong knowledge claim. Now, the strong knowledge claim says that all knowledge must be grounded in science. Now, notice, if this strong knowledge claim is true, and if science cannot explain free will, then we can't have knowledge of free will. If it's irrational to believe in the existence of something that we can't in principle have knowledge of, then it's irrational to believe in free will. So at times, Dolbach seems to be making this argument. Now, there's a problem with this argument. The problem is that it just doesn't appear true that all knowledge is grounded in science. That is, it seems that we have knowledge outside of science, or we have some knowledge that science doesn't explain. So, for example, there are kinds of practical knowledge that science doesn't explain, or that kind of knowledge isn't grounded in science. So, an artist, for example, who knows just the right way to make a word beautiful, a cook who knows just the amount of spices to put to make something taste very good, a speculator on the finance market who knows when to buy and when to sell at the right time, or maybe, people in a romantic relationship who are arguing with each other, who yet claim that they know the other person still loves them, even though they've been going through lots of trials and tribulations. Now, the idea with all these examples is to provide cases where it seems we have knowledge. An artist who knows how to do the right touch, a speculator who says, buy now, sell now, I know this is going to make money. But these all seem like instances of knowledge. But these kinds of knowledge are outside the domain of science. Right? These are knowledges that don't belong to scientific laws, especially ones that are causally determined. So, if that's right, then Dolbach's strong knowledge claim is false. But if Dolbach's strong knowledge claim is false, then it's not irrational to believe that we have free will. Because remember, Dolbach says it's irrational to believe in something that you can't have knowledge of. Since science can't explain free will, it's irrational to believe in free will. But there are lots of things science can't explain that we yet have knowledge of, and it's rational to believe, in their existence. So this kind of argument from the strong knowledge claim is subject to that objection. But now, there's one way Dolbach can respond to the argument that I've given him. Right? Dolbach can say, well, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe not all knowledge is grounded in science. But whenever we do have scientific knowledge, that knowledge must be grounded in universal and necessary laws. Now, this claim is what I call the weak knowledge claim, also on your handout. Scientific knowledge must be grounded in universal and necessary law. Now, if this claim is true, and D'Holbach's argument is based on this claim, then if free will cannot be grounded in universal and necessary laws, because remember, free will means we could do, free will means our actions aren't determined, then we can't have scientific knowledge of free will. So this is a different argument than the first argument I just described. And actually, this argument is the argument that's given on the flip side, or on the front side of handout 1.5. It's the scientific explanation argument. Remember, hard determinism, at least the argument as I've sketched it, says science cannot explain free will. Now, D'Holbach might be taken to be saying this, and then D'Holbach might further say, well, look, since science can't explain free will, it might not mean that free will is impossible, but it's really hard to understand what free will is if we can't explain it in principle by science. Right? There are many things we can't explain by science, but maybe one day we'll get to the point where we can. But if free will doesn't operate to universal and necessary laws, then we'll never be able to explain free will. And so if you believe we have free will, well, there seems to be a problem. Science explains lots of things, but it can't explain free will. So that's the kind of argument that D'Holbach might be taking to make. Now, this argument can be taken to face two objections. Now, one, the weak knowledge claim itself appears to be false. Remember, the weak knowledge claim says that scientific knowledge must be grounded in universal and necessary laws. Now, that just doesn't seem true, because we have evidence today of quantum physics. And quantum physics claims to provide evidence that not all events are determined and necessary, right? So the behavior of subatomic particles don't operate according to universal and necessary laws. But yet, our knowledge of them is scientific knowledge, and so it seems that the weak knowledge claim is true, because we have scientific knowledge of something that it doesn't operate by universal laws. So if that's right, then maybe we can have scientific knowledge of free will that doesn't operate to universal and necessary laws. Now, D'Holbach can respond to this objection I've given him in the following way. He can say, well, even if it's true that subatomic particles is a case of scientific knowledge where there aren't universal and necessary laws, he can still say that that doesn't show that free will is possible. Because free will doesn't just require that there are no universal and necessary laws, because free will is not the same as random. So notice the behavior of subatomic particles might be explained as being random behavior. But the actions of human beings that are supposed to be free are not random. We don't just do things out of nowhere, but we do things according to something that belongs to us. So D'Holbach might say, well, yeah, you're right. Some science doesn't operate by universal laws, but when it does, it's random. But a random behavior won't explain human behavior, because free human behavior is not random. So D'Holbach might say the objection doesn't really work. But there's one more objection someone can make. One might say, well, look, there are certain sciences that operate without supposing that universal and necessary laws operate. And in particular, these are the sciences that deal with human action itself. So the social sciences, economics, history, anthropology, so on and so forth. These sciences certainly have laws that explain human behavior, but oftentimes these laws aren't taken to be literally universally necessary and determinative actions. These laws are kind of general. They say most of the time when the prices go up, people aren't going to buy it. Most of the time when prices go down, people are going to buy it, so on and so forth. But in any case, the laws in the social sciences say that there are rules that people tend to follow, that actions tend to go this way or that way. But these sciences don't presume they always do, and they necessarily do. So here's the problem. The social sciences are science. They give us scientific knowledge of human action, but they don't presuppose universal and necessary laws. If that's right, then the weak knowledge claim is false, because we have some knowledge, and in fact, scientific knowledge of human action that isn't grounded in universal and necessary laws. Many philosophers have argued in this way, but importantly, if we go back to handout 1.5, this is a rejection of premise 1. This objection says that premise 1 is false, because premise 1 says all scientific explanations presuppose universal and necessary laws. That's not true for the social sciences. So this objection is looking to try to say that, one, scientific knowledge isn't as stringent as Dolbach is making it. And if that's right, it could be possible to have scientific laws or scientific knowledge of free will. But if there is such thing as scientific knowledge of free will, then Dolbach's argument that science precludes free will can't be right. So hopefully that helps clear things up.